Only moments ago, the latest trade ultimatum issued by Donald Trump began to unravel almost immediately, and understanding why this happened is essential to grasping the broader implications now unfolding. The central miscalculation lies in Trump's assumption that Canada would fracture under pressure. Instead, Canada has remained resolute, undeterred, and increasingly coordinated. While Washington escalates its rhetoric, Ottawa and the Canadian provinces are quietly consolidating power, creating a unified front that is already producing consequences for the United States rather than for Canada. What Trump framed as leverage is rapidly transforming into instability for American businesses, border, state governments, and consumers. Canada has issued a clear warning to Washington, not through theatrical speeches or retaliatory headlines, but through measured coordination. Provincial governments that often disagree politically are now operating in alignment. Trump appears to interpret this as weakness or as an opportunity to exploit internal divisions. That belief is proving to be deeply flawed. The real-world effect of this misjudgment is now visible in disrupted markets, nervous governors, and growing anxiety across American industries that rely on Canadian resources every single day. The most striking early signal came from Ontario. The Premier publicly acknowledged that Ontario supplies electricity to approximately 1.5 million American homes and industrial facilities across Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. He did not threaten an outright shutdown, but he did something far more destabilizing. He suggested that Ontario could review, evaluate, and manage those exports differently. In energy markets, even the suggestion of uncertainty is enough to trigger price volatility. Millions of American consumers are downstream from that metaphorical switch, and this is not a hypothetical scenario. Electricity markets react instantly to risk, and utilities respond by raising prices to shield themselves from supply disruption. At the same time, Trump's inner circle has been floating tariff proposals ranging from 25% to as high as 35% on Canadian imports. These proposals are not vague ideas. They are detailed schedules covering aluminum, timber, vehicles, auto parts, and energy-related products. Markets have taken notice. Supply chains that depend on frictionless cross-border movement are now in a state of heightened anxiety. The speed of the reaction tells us everything. This is not about long-term projections anymore. The repercussions are already landing. The most revealing aspect of this moment is that the intended target is not weakening. It is consolidating. Canada is not scrambling. It is organizing, and the economic shockwaves are reaching American firms and state governments before they ever reach Ottawa. Costs are rising, energy stability is being questioned, and political pressure is intensifying across multiple U.S. states that depend on Canadian inputs as a matter of daily economic survival. To understand how we arrived here, we need to rewind just a few weeks. This confrontation did not emerge in isolation. It follows a clear and familiar pattern. Over the past month, Trump has steadily intensified his trade rhetoric, returning almost daily to the same tactics he used during his first term. Tariffs, warnings, demands, and public ultimatums have once again become his preferred instruments. He frames these moves as demonstrations of strength, branding them under the familiar banner of America First. But experts across economics, law, and international trade have been warning that this approach failed before and is likely to fail again. Behind closed doors, Trump's advisors have been discussing broad tariff measures aimed not at China or Russia, but at Canada, the United States' largest and most integrated trading partner. That alone is extraordinary. Canada accounts for nearly $900 billion in annual trade with the United States. Millions of American jobs depend directly on that relationship. Entire regional economies are structured around it. Yet those realities are being brushed aside in favor of a political strategy built on confrontation. The proposed tariffs are sweeping. Aluminum, timber, vehicles, auto components, and energy products are all on the list. These are not marginal goods. They are foundational inputs for American manufacturing and construction. Economists have repeatedly warned that targeting these sectors invites immediate retaliation and cascading price increases. Governors from Michigan, New York, and Minnesota have been quietly voicing concern for weeks. They understand the data. They understand how deeply their states are exposed, but those warnings have been ignored. Trump has insisted that Canada will eventually submit. His argument rests on the assumption that Canada's provinces will splinter under pressure, turning against one another due to political differences. That assumption is now collapsing in real time. While Washington postures publicly, Ottawa has been coordinating behind the scenes. More importantly, the provinces themselves are communicating directly. Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, regions with very different political cultures, have reached the same conclusion. If Washington escalates, they will respond together. This outcome was, in many ways, predictable. Trump has deployed similar strategies against the European Union, Mexico, and China. Each time, he promised swift victories and easy concessions. Each time, the result was retaliation, market instability, higher domestic prices, and political backlash at home. What makes this situation different is Canada's unique leverage. Canada does not need to mirror U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar. Its power lies elsewhere. Energy, electricity, critical minerals, and automotive components cross the U.S. Canada border multiple times before a finished product ever reaches a consumer. Disrupting those flows would be felt by American manufacturers within hours, not months. Assembly lines depend on just-in-time delivery. Even small delays can halt production. Trump is inviting precisely this escalation, and the environment is now dangerously volatile. What makes Canada's response particularly effective is that it is not symbolic. It is targeted. It is strategic. It is designed to strike at vulnerabilities that Trump cannot easily dismiss. That is why the mood in Washington shifted so quickly. Confidence gave way to concern almost overnight. The shift began early in the morning when Trump reiterated his threat with greater specificity. He signaled the immediate imposition of tariffs on Canadian aluminum, timber, vehicles, and energy exports, with internal discussions pointing to rates as high as 35% and no exemptions. Financial markets reacted almost instantly. Futures dipped, manufacturing stocks wavered, automotive suppliers took a hit. Companies like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis saw pressure on their valuations because their supply chains are deeply integrated with Canada. Analysts estimate that a single mid-sized vehicle assembled in the United States contains between 8 zeros, euro 0 and 10 zero, euro $0 worth of Canadian-sourced components. That figure alone explains the market reaction. The costs are unavoidable. They cannot be absorbed indefinitely. They will be passed on. Ottawa's initial response was telling. There was no immediate press conference, no dramatic announcement. Instead, the Prime Minister convened an urgent call with provincial leaders. The message that emerged was unity. Hours later, Ontario Premier Doug Ford spoke publicly and delivered a warning that reverberated through energy markets. He reminded the United States that Ontario supplies electricity to millions of American consumers and suggested that those exports could be reviewed. That phrasing alone sent shockwaves. Electricity markets are exquisitely sensitive to uncertainty. Analysts immediately projected wholesale power price increases of 7 to 12% across affected regions if Canada even hinted at restrictions. Then Quebec followed. Hydro-Quebec confirmed it was reviewing its contractual flexibility with American partners, signaling that it could legally reduce supply while remaining compliant with existing agreements. British Columbia added another layer by suggesting it could slow permitting for energy infrastructure bound for the United States. Alberta began evaluating refined energy exports. Suddenly, what Trump framed as a bilateral dispute became a complex, multi-front confrontation involving provinces and states. The economic reality overwhelmingly favors Canada in this scenario. The United States cannot quickly replace Canadian hydroelectric power. It cannot source aluminum without raising costs by 15 to 20%. It cannot restructure automotive supply chains overnight. These constraints are structural, not political. Inside Washington, the tone changed. Administration officials attempted to downplay the situation. One advisor claimed the threats were merely negotiation tactics. Another insisted Canada would ultimately fold, but behind the scenes, panic was growing. Governors were calling the White House. Michigan officials warned about auto plant disruptions. New York utilities raised alarms about winter energy costs. Minnesota representatives demanded briefings. Canada then unveiled the next phase of its strategy. Instead of immediately imposing tariffs, it published a framework for targeted retaliation. The list focused on politically sensitive American exports from swing states. Agricultural products, industrial tools, and consumer goods tied to Trump's political base were all included. The estimated exposure ranged from $40 to $50 billion. This approach was not improvised. It was informed by experience. In 2018, Canada's targeted retaliation forced the removal of U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. This time, the response is faster, broader, and more coordinated. Markets reacted again. Transportation stocks fell. Regional utilities slid. Auto suppliers warned of volatility. One major Midwest manufacturer quietly shelved plans for overtime. The central revelation is now unavoidable. Trump expected Canada to fracture. Instead, it unified. Provincial governments are synchronizing their actions across energy, manufacturing, and politics. This undermines the core premise of Trump's strategy, which relies on the belief that the United States can endure economic pain longer than its adversaries. That belief collapses when the pain hits American households directly through power bills, vehicle prices, and job insecurity. Internal projections show that American consumers would absorb 60 to 70% of tariff costs within 6 months. Wages would not keep pace. Political support would erode. Republican lawmakers from border states are already breaking ranks quietly, seeking exemptions and special treatment. Canada is fully aware of these fractures and is exploiting them with precision. The next phase of this conflict extends beyond economics into law. Trump is invoking emergency trade authorities intended for genuine national security threats. Legal experts are raising alarms. George Conway and other constitutional scholars point out that the Constitution grants Congress authority over foreign trade. Emergency powers exist, but they require real emergencies. Canada does not qualify. Courts have historically upheld executive trade actions only in cases of clear national security threats. Applying that logic to Canada, a NATO ally and defense partner, is legally tenuous. Challenges are inevitable. Importers are preparing lawsuits. Judges are already signaling skepticism. Economists emphasize that tariffs of this magnitude function as taxes on American consumers. Models suggest annual household costs could rise by $100 to $800. History reinforces this warning. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 followed the same logic and produced devastating consequences. International law compounds the problem. The USMCA includes dispute resolution mechanisms that Canada can invoke immediately. Unilateral tariffs without valid justification violate both the agreement and World Trade Organization rules. This opens the door to coordinated legal challenges from other U.S. trading partners. What many overlook is the speed of modern response. Markets react instantly. Courts move faster. Allies coordinate more efficiently. Trump's strategy assumes delays that no longer exist. That miscalculation magnifies the damage. Meanwhile, the economic effects are already spreading. Aluminum prices jumped. Timber futures surged. Vehicle prices are projected to rise by $500 to $300. Auto workers face reduced shifts. Farmers brace for retaliation. Electricity bills are likely to climb in northern states during winter. Small businesses are particularly vulnerable. Thin margins leave little room to absorb cost increases. Hiring freezes and closures are real risks. Globally, confidence in U.S. reliability is eroding. Europe is watching, Mexico is concerned, Asian partners are questioning long-term stability, supporters argue this pain is necessary, they claim tariffs will force concessions and restore jobs, but history contradicts them. If tariffs worked before, why was billions in farm aid required? Why did manufacturing slow? Why did exporters lose markets permanently? The courts are unlikely to stay silent. Overreach invites correction. National security claims ring hollow when applied to Canada. The strategy appears driven more by image than substance. Retreat now would look weak, but escalation looks reckless. 3 scenarios lie ahead. In the best case, pressure forces a quiet pause, tariffs are delayed, retaliation is frozen, disputes move to arbitration, damage is contained. This requires restraint. The most likely scenario involves partial tariffs, targeted retaliation, legal battles, and prolonged uncertainty. Prices rise, investment stalls, damage accumulates slowly but steadily. The worst case is full escalation, energy restrictions tighten, prices spike, allies align against the United States, courts intervene too late to prevent serious harm. Political backlash follows. Across all scenarios, ego is the decisive variable. When image overrides evidence, escalation continues. Trade conflicts do not reward bravado. They punish miscalculation. This moment matters because it affects real lives, power bills, grocery prices, job security. The consequences are not abstract, they are immediate and personal. What we are witnessing is a test of judgment. When policy ignores economic reality and legal limits, the outcome is predictable. Costs rise, stability erodes, trust collapses. Power without restraint becomes a liability. Trade wars are not won through speeches. They are settled by math, markets, and law. Right now, all 3 are pointing in the same direction.